My name is Karen, and for most of my life, I found comfort in the quiet hum of numbers. They didn't lie, they didn't shout, they didn't abandon you when things got hard. Growing up in Atlanta, it was just me and my dad in a narrow house with creaky floors and a leaky roof. Every morning, he brewed cheap coffee that filled the kitchen with its bitter steam, and every night he came home smelling faintly of grease and ink from running his small print shop. He was the one constant after my mom walked out when I was a kid. I was too young to understand why she left, but old enough to remember the sound of the door closing and the silence afterward. My dad never spoke ill of her. He just picked up the pieces, juggling the business, paying the bills, packing my lunch, reminding me to double knot my shoelaces before school. He was practical to the bone, the kind of man who saved every receipt, labeled every box, and insisted that stability was the greatest gift we could give ourselves. Work hard, save smart, keep your head down, he'd say, pushing a calculator across the table like it was a compass. And I listened, maybe too well. By the time I hit my 30s, I had become the very definition of predictable. An accountant at a mid-size firm, clocking in and out like a machine. I spent my days balancing spreadsheets until the numbers blurred together. My cubicle was my world. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, the faint buzz of the copy machine always in the background. Exciting? Hardly. The biggest thrill in recent years had been when our office upgraded to new accounting software, a change that rattled everyone else, but, secretly, made my heart skip. I told myself I liked the stability, that I didn't need more, but sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd confuse safety with smallness. Still, routine was easier than disappointment, safer than risk. My father, getting older and slower now, still called every Sunday to remind me to check my savings accounts and to tell me, "Don't let anyone take advantage of you, Karen." I always laughed, promised I wouldn't, and hung up. Back then, I had no idea how prophetic those words would be. Everything shifted one evening when my college friend Tessa dragged me to her birthday party. I almost didn't go. My excuse list was ready. Deadlines at work, fatigue, the weather. But she was relentless, the kind of friend who could sell sand in the desert. "Karen, you need a night off. No spreadsheets, no calculators, just music and people." Against my instincts, I agreed. Her midtown apartment was buzzing when I arrived. Music thumped through the walls so hard I could feel it in my chest. The living room was packed shoulder to shoulder, people laughing, shouting, raising glasses that glistened under colored lights. I hovered in the doorway for a moment, clutching a ginger ale I grabbed from the counter, already regretting saying yes. My navy dress suddenly felt too tight, my confidence even tighter. I slipped into the corner near a bookshelf and stayed there, hoping I could blend in with the furniture. From there, I watched. Couples leaned in close, friends roared with laughter, strangers swapped stories. It felt like a world I had missed the invitation to join. I was preparing my escape plan, 30 minutes, maybe less, then a polite text to Tessa about not feeling well, when it happened. The floorboards near me shifted, and suddenly someone was there. A man, tall, with an easy confidence that seemed to shrink the noisy room around us. His dark hair was just the right kind of messy, his smile too disarming for someone I had never met. His voice cut through the music as if it was tuned to a frequency only I could hear. "Hey, you're Karen, right?" My fingers tightened around my drink. I blinked, startled that he knew my name. "Yeah, and you are... Charles?" He grinned like we were already sharing a private joke. "That's me. Mind if I hang out here for a bit?" I could only nod, hoping the music disguised how shaky my voice was when I said, "Not at all." He leaned against the wall beside me like it was the most natural spot in the room. "So, Karen, what's your deal? Why are you hiding out in the corner? You allergic to fun?" His tone was teasing, but his eyes, steady, curious, were locked on mine. It wasn't the question that mattered. It was the way he asked it, like he actually cared about the answer. I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Just here for Tessa's birthday. You know her?" He chuckled. "Work with her, unfortunately. She's impossible to say no to." "Tell me about it," I said, relieved we had common ground. "You're an accountant, right? She mentioned it once." I laughed, surprised he remembered. "Yeah, numbers are my thing. Not exactly glamorous." He tilted his head, considering me. "Sounds like you're the one keeping the world from falling apart. That's kind of heroic, don't you think? I wasn't sure if he was serious or just good at flattery, but the words landed in a place I hadn't realized was empty. What about you? I asked quickly, needing to shift the spotlight. What's your story? Just a guy looking for a good time, he said, though there was something restless behind his grin. Graphic design, but honestly, my job's more about making PowerPoints look pretty than anything creative. Pays the bills, though. We kept talking, and slowly the noise faded. He asked about my favorite books, dog-eared mystery novels stacked by my bed, and told me about his love for old sci-fi flicks. His questions weren't shallow. They pulled pieces of me out into the open, parts I usually kept hidden. With him, it felt easy, like I could breathe. When he suggested stepping outside for some air, I didn't hesitate. The backyard was small, with a string of half-dead fairy lights and Tess's rickety patio chairs, but to me it felt like stepping into another world. The night air was cool, wrapping around me like a blanket, and the Atlanta skyline glowed in the distance. Charles and I sat side by side, talking about everything and nothing. His hatred for his job, my secret obsession with solving puzzles, the way the city lights looked like they were holding their breath. For once, I wasn't counting minutes or calculating exits. I was just there. Later, when the party thinned and people staggered home, Charles pulled out his phone. His smile was hesitant this time, like the question mattered more than he wanted to admit. "Can I get your number, Karen? I'd like to see you again." My heart stumbled. Guys like Charles didn't just appear in my carefully measured life, but something in me, a whisper, a hunger, leaned forward. "Sure." I typed my number into his phone, my fingers trembling. His grin lit up the night, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, my life was about to get bigger than numbers. The next morning, my phone lit up with a message from Charles. "Had fun last night. Dinner soon?" It was simple, but my stomach flipped like I'd swallowed a live wire. I wasn't used to this. Attention that didn't feel like a burden, interest that didn't come with strings. For years, my life had been orderly, predictable. Suddenly, one text had me pacing my apartment, rereading it a dozen times before replying, "Sure, when?" We agreed on Friday. That whole week, I moved through work in a haze, my coworkers asking if I'd won the lottery because I kept smiling at nothing. At home, I stood in front of my closet like a teenager, debating every outfit until I finally settled on a navy dress. Safe, but pretty. When Friday came, Charles pulled up in a modest sedan that was clean but not flashy. He stepped out wearing a shirt that was just slightly wrinkled, his hair falling in that effortless way that suggested he hadn't tried too hard. "You look amazing, Karen," he said with such ease that I flushed scarlet. He took me to a small bistro tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop, the kind of place you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. Warm lighting, the scent of garlic and fresh bread drifting from the kitchen, soft jazz humming from speakers hidden somewhere above. It wasn't extravagant, but it felt intentional, thoughtful. Over pasta, his with truffle sauce, mine with safe marinara, he leaned forward, twirling his fork like he had all the time in the world. "So, Karen, tell me something nobody else knows about you." I laughed nervously, poking at my food. "I'm not that interesting." "Try me." His eyes sparkled, daring me. I bit my lip, then blurted, "I can solve a Rubik's Cube in under a minute." His fork froze midair, and his grin widened. "No way. That's legit impressive. You have to show me sometime." "Maybe," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Your turn. Any hidden talents?" He puffed out his chest, mock serious. "I make the best breakfast tacos you'll ever eat. Challenge me sometime and I'll prove it." "Deal," I teased, surprising myself with how easily I was bantering back. The nerves I had carried all week melted. We talked for hours, about my love of numbers and order, his frustration with a job that drained more than inspired, the silly details that usually get left unsaid. Time slipped past unnoticed. It felt like the world outside that bistro had gone still. In the weeks that followed, Charles pulled me into corners of Atlanta I'd never thought to explore. He showed me a tiny coffee shop hidden behind a record store, a quiet park with a view of the skyline where joggers never went, a hole-in-the-wall diner with pancakes so good I almost cried. I started to see myself differently. Not just the quiet accountant tucked behind spreadsheets, but someone capable of laughter, adventure, even spontaneity. Charles made me feel seen, really seen, in a way I hadn't realized I was starving for. One weekend, he took me to meet his parents. I expected it to be awkward, but they greeted me like family before I even stepped inside. His mother, Linda, was a whirlwind, hugging me so tightly I nearly lost my breath. "Karen, we've heard so much about you." Her smile was warm, but her eyes sharp, like she was already cataloging me. His father, Ron, had a grip like a vice when he shook my hand. "Good to meet you. Charles says you're a wizard with numbers." "It's not that exciting," I said, laughing, though something about the way Ron sized me up made me shift in my seat later at dinner. The meal was loud, full of overlapping stories. Linda gushed about her gardening, Ron launched into endless tales about his old sales job, and Charles kept brushing his hand against mine under the table. I told myself this was belonging, that this was what families did, fill rooms with noise, jokes, and the warmth of too much food. Still, there were moments. Linda's questions cut a little deeper than casual curiosity. How much I made, if my firm offered retirement benefits, if my father's business was still running. She asked it all with a smile, as if these were harmless, everyday questions. But I noticed how she lingered on my answers, how Charles never stepped in to redirect. Later, I brought Charles to meet my dad. We sat at his favorite diner, the kind where the waitresses called everyone honey. My dad studied Charles carefully over his coffee cup, his silence heavier than words. Finally, he nodded. "He's a good one, Karen. Hold on to him." Those words stayed with me. My father wasn't quick with praise, but when he gave it, it carried weight. The months blurred, nights in hidden corners of the city, Sunday mornings tangled in laughter and coffee. It all felt like momentum I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. One evening, while we were walking through Piedmont Park with the skyline glowing like embers behind us, Charles stopped suddenly. His hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders tense. "Karen, I've been thinking," he said, his voice softer than usual. My pulse quickened. He looked at me, and his expression stripped away the jokes, the ease. "I don't want to wait. I know it's fast, but will you marry me?" For a moment, the world tilted. I couldn't breathe. But staring into his eyes, I felt something pull at me, undeniable and terrifying. Certainty. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Yes, Charles." Our wedding was small, just friends and family, at a venue near the Chattahoochee River. My dress was simple, my cheeks ached from smiling, and for the first time in my life, I thought, this is it. This is the life Dad raised me to believe I could have. Tessa snapped photos, I posted them online, and my heart nearly burst. Marriage was supposed to be bliss, and sometimes it was. The quiet routines, the late-night conversations, the way Charles held my hand when we crossed streets. But reality pressed in faster than I expected. We moved into a small apartment in Virginia Highland. Cramped, noisy, but ours. We unpacked wedding gifts, dodged Atlanta traffic, and tried to build a rhythm. I clung to the little things, cooking dinner together, folding laundry side by side, the simple comfort of knowing someone was waiting when I got home. Then, one evening, Charles dropped a suggestion like a stone into still water. "What if we moved in with my parents?" He said it casually, setting aside a crystal vase we'd just unwrapped. I froze, a mug in my hand. "Live with Linda and Ron? Full-time?" "Yeah." His eyes lit with enthusiasm that felt just a little too rehearsed. "They're getting older, and I'd feel better being there to help. Plus, it'd save us money on rent." It made sense on paper. My father's voice echoed in my head. "Be practical, Karen." But the idea of living under Linda's sharp gaze, Ron's firm handshake turned judgment. It sent a shiver through me. "Are you sure they're okay with that?" I asked carefully. "Mom's been hinting ever since we got engaged," Charles said, his tone reassuring. "It'll be great. You'll see." I forced a smile, though unease knotted in my stomach. Some part of me already knew. This was the first step into a life I hadn't agreed to. The first few days living with Linda and Ron felt almost like a welcome home parade. Linda bustled around the kitchen, her voice lilting as she offered me towels, snacks, advice on where to put our boxes. Ron clapped Charles on the back every time he walked through the living room, proud to have his son under the same roof again. At first, I tried to believe this was family, that this was what marriage looked like, two households blending into one, laughter echoing through old walls. Linda insisted we eat together every night. She placed plates in front of me with exaggerated care. "Karen, you're too thin. Here, have seconds." I smiled politely, though the food often sat heavy in my stomach. Her meatloaf was dry, her green beans limp, but I never said a word. I was raised to be polite, to endure discomfort quietly. But within a week, the shine dulled. Linda had a knack for appearing everywhere, tapping on our bedroom door at odd hours, poking her head in with a bright smile. "Just checking if you need anything, dear." Once she knocked while I was folding laundry and stepped inside before I could answer, inspecting the way I stacked Charles's shirts. "You're meticulous," she observed, her tone hovering between praise and critique. Charles always liked things just so. Ron, less invasive but no less heavy-handed, spent evenings perched in his recliner, recounting his glory days in sales. He'd gesture toward me with his glass of sweet tea. "Karen, you'd have made one hell of an assistant. Sharp with numbers, steady with details. We'd have closed deals left and right." I laughed when expected, but inside I felt myself shrinking, being reduced to someone who existed only in service to others. Then came the repairs. It was over Linda's meatloaf, again, that Charles cleared his throat. "So, the house needs some work." His tone was casual, like he was mentioning the weather. I nearly choked on my potatoes. "Work, like repairs?" Ron sighed, his face folding with weariness. "Roofs leaking, plumbing's shot. It's been years since we could afford proper maintenance." Charles glanced at me, then away. "I was thinking we could all pitch in, make this place shine again." My fork stilled midair. I had just taken a pay cut at work. Our wedding had already drained most of my savings. But all three faces, Charles, Linda, Ron, turned toward me, expectant. "I'll see what I can do," I murmured, though my stomach twisted. Linda's eyes filled with tears instantly. She reached for my hand across the table. "Oh, Karen, you're a godsend." Ron nodded, his voice gruff. "Family sticks together." Family. The word pressed down on me like a contract I hadn't signed. Over the next few weeks, my life became a blur of contractors, invoices, and dwindling bank balances. I wrote check after check, roof tiles, new pipes, electrical rewiring. Each time Linda gushed, "It's gorgeous, Karen," while Ron slapped me on the shoulder, calling me a lifesaver. But every time I handed over money, I felt less like a lifesaver and more like a bank. At night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the house groan and shift. Charles would squeeze my hand. "It's for our future, right?" His voice was soft, persuasive. I'd echo, "Right." But inside, I wondered whose future we were really building. Despite the drain, I tried to keep peace, tried to believe kindness would circle back. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. One afternoon, I overheard Linda on the phone while I passed the kitchen. Yes, Karen's helping with the bills," she said, her voice thick with satisfaction. "She's very generous." She laughed softly, a laugh that made my skin prickle. "Oh, don't worry. We'll take care of her. She won't go anywhere." She didn't know I was listening. The house itself seemed to conspire against me. Every creak of the old floorboards reminded me this wasn't mine. Every photo of Charles as a boy, on the mantel, on the walls, in albums Linda eagerly flipped through, reminded me I was an outsider walking through someone else's story. Still, Charles was affectionate, if distracted. He'd kiss my cheek before heading to work, tell me I was beautiful when I least expected it. At times, I let myself believe love could outweigh the imbalance, that maybe this was just what marriage looked like: compromise, sacrifice, patience. But then the bomb dropped. One evening, over grilled chicken and green beans, Linda's usual chatter faltered. She glanced at Ron, her eyes misty. "We need to talk." Charles set down his fork. I felt my stomach tighten. Ron cleared his throat, his bravado gone. "The house. It's got a mortgage. A big one. We owe $300,000, and the bank's breathing down our necks. If we don't pay it soon, we could lose everything." The words slammed into me. My fork clinked against the plate. "300,000? My voice was sharp, louder than I intended. "All the repairs I've already paid for, and you didn't think to mention this?" Linda's tears spilled over. "We were ashamed, Karen. We thought we could handle it. But with the repairs..." I stared at Charles, searching his face for shock, for outrage. Instead, I found only a guarded calm. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe," he said softly, "you could talk to your dad. He's got the means, right? It would secure the house for us, for our future." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. My dad. The man already battling health issues, the man who had sacrificed everything to raise me alone. They wanted me to ask him for $300,000. I felt the room tilt, the walls pressing closer. You can't be serious, I whispered, my throat tight. Please, Karen, Linda sobbed, clutching her napkin like it was a lifeline. This is our home. We've lived here for decades. Ron's voice cracked for the first time. We'll lose everything. I pushed back from the table, my appetite gone. My hands trembled in my lap, hidden beneath the cloth. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Charles's even breathing beside me felt like betrayal. My father's voice echoed in my head. Don't let anyone take advantage of you, Karen. But what if it was already too late? I held out for a week, clinging to the hope that maybe Charles would come to his senses, that Linda and Ron would back down. But every dinner turned into a theater of pleading. Ron reminding us how long the house had been in the family. Linda dabbing her eyes with a napkin, whispering about memories etched into the walls. Charles silent but steady, staring at me with that expectant gaze that said, It's on you, Karen. Finally, I broke. I called my dad. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. He answered on the second ring. Karen, everything all right? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Dad, I need to ask you something. Something big. There was a pause. Go ahead. I explained everything. The mortgage, the repairs, the pressure. My voice cracked halfway through, shame bleeding into every word. To my surprise, he didn't hesitate. I'll help, Karen. Of course I will. His tone was calm, almost relieved to shoulder some of my burden. But then it sharpened. On one condition, everything is formal, receipts, agreements, documents, no loose ends. My chest tightened with gratitude. Thank you, Dad. Thank you. When I told Charles, his reaction wasn't relief, it was irritation. Why does it have to be so formal? He muttered, running a hand through his hair. It's family. Can't your dad just trust us? It's $300,000, Charles, I snapped, louder than I meant. He's being careful, and so am I. He mumbled something about paperwork ruining everything, but didn't push further. The money was transferred, the contracts signed. Linda and Ron gushed with relief, smothering me in gratitude that felt more like theater than sincerity. You saved us, Karen, Linda wept, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. But between Charles and me, something shifted. A coldness crept in. His touches grew perfunctory. His jokes, forced. He came home later, his excuses thin. I told myself it was stress, but deep down, I knew it was something darker. Then the call came. I was at work, halfway through reconciling invoices, when my cousin's voice broke through the static of my phone. Karen, it's your dad. He had a heart attack. He didn't make it. The world tilted. The numbers on the screen blurred into meaningless shapes. No, I whispered, gripping the desk. No, that can't. But it was true. The funeral arrangements blurred together. Flowers, black dresses, whispered condolences. I moved through it all like a ghost, clinging to lists and details because that's what my dad had taught me. Stay organized, stay steady. Inside, I was collapsing. Charles was there, of course, his arm around me, his words rehearsed. I'm so sorry, Karen. But his embrace felt stiff, hollow. His eyes didn't hold the grief I needed mirrored back at me. One evening, a few days after the funeral, I returned home earlier than expected. My keys fumbled in the lock. That's when I heard voices drifting from the living room. Charles's voice, sharp with frustration. I can't keep this up. Living with her is exhausting. She's too much. Linda's reply, low and venomous. Just hold on, Charles. We need those receipts her father had. Karen's got them now. My blood ran cold. Charles's tone hardened. I'll grab them and burn them. Then I'm done. I'm starting over with that heiress I told you about. She's got real money. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen in the doorway, the keys still in my hand, their words slicing through me like glass. The family I had poured everything into, my money, my trust, my love, was plotting to erase me. Charles didn't love me. He had never loved me. He had used me, and Linda and Ron were part of it. Rage and heartbreak churned inside me, but I forced my face into a mask. With deliberate noise, I shoved the door open and called, Hey, I'm back! The sound startled them. I caught the flicker of panic in Charles's eyes, the way Linda smoothed her expression too quickly. Oh, Karen, Linda said, syrupy sweet. How'd the funeral planning go? Fine, I replied, forcing a smile. My voice felt foreign in my throat. Just exhausting. Their eyes darted toward each other, nervous, but I pretended not to notice. I laughed at their jokes, ate Linda's casserole, even kissed Charles goodnight. all while inside, my heart was a storm. They thought they had me fooled. They thought they had won. But they underestimated one thing. My father's voice still echoed inside me. Don't let anyone take advantage of you, Karen. And I wasn't about to. The morning after I overheard them, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My face looked pale, hollow, my eyes bruised from lack of sleep. My fingers gripped the sink so tightly I thought the porcelain might crack. Inside me, two voices warred. The broken daughter, who had just buried her father, and the woman who had inherited his grit. I forced my breathing steady. They thought I was blind. They thought I was weak. But I wasn't going to crumble, not yet. For days, I played my part, smiling at Linda's endless casseroles, nodding at Ron's old sales stories, pretending not to notice when Charles came home later and later. At night, I lay beside him, his back turned, and whispered silent promises to myself. Wait, watch. Don't let them see you break. But my father's foresight was my shield. The receipts, the contracts, the documentation, those weren't just papers. They were weapons. He had known, somehow, that I might need them. That his daughter, careful with numbers but too trusting with people, would have to protect herself with proof. One evening, as Linda cleared plates from the table, Charles leaned back, his tone casual. So, Karen, where did you put all those receipts Dad gave you? The house stuff, the bank paperwork? I felt my pulse spike. Why? I asked, keeping my voice light. Just wondering, he said, too quickly. Figured it'd be good to keep everything in one place, you know? Linda chimed in, her tone saccharine. Yes, dear, organization is important. You're so good at that. Maybe we could look them over together sometime. I sipped my water to hide the tremor in my hands. They're safe, I said simply. Don't worry about it. Charles's smile faltered. He pressed no further, but I saw the calculation in his eyes. The weeks crawled by, tense with unspoken battles. They thought they were waiting me out, wearing me down. But I was studying them, learning their rhythms. The way Linda's voice dipped into sharpness when she thought I wasn't listening. The way Ron's laughter grew hollow when he spoke about money. And Charles, the way he lingered by his phone, smirking at messages I wasn't meant to see. Finally, the mask cracked. It was after dinner, the air heavy with silence. Charles set his fork down, his face expressionless. Karen, you need to pack your things. I blinked. What? He didn't flinch. I've found someone else, someone better. This isn't working anymore. Linda laughed, sharp and cruel. We're done with you, dear. We only needed your money. The words should have gutted me, but instead, a strange calm settled over me. I leaned back, studying their smug faces. What about the house? The $300,000 I paid off? The repairs I covered? Ron chuckled, his tone mocking. This is our house, Karen. You're nothing here. Charles smirked. And those receipts you were so proud of? We burned them. You've got nothing. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy. Then I laughed, a sharp, startling sound that made their smiles falter. What's so funny? Charles snapped. I wiped a tear from my eye, still chuckling. You really think you're clever? Those receipts you burned? They were copies. The originals are with my lawyer. The color drained from their faces. You're bluffing, Charles stammered. Try me, I said, my voice like steel. Every cent is documented. Every transfer, every repair. My lawyer has it all. You think you can erase me? No, I want my money back. Every dollar. Or my next call is to the police. Linda's composure cracked, her hands shaking. Karen, wait. Let's talk about this. Ron muttered something about compromise, his voice unsteady. But I was done playing the quiet, dutiful wife. My father's words rang in my ears like a battle cry. Don't let anyone take advantage of you. The next days became a war of negotiations. They tried everything. Tears, pleas, even false apologies. Charles swung between anger and fake tenderness, trying to sway me. But I held firm. At the kitchen table, now legally mine in my mind, I laid out the terms with cold precision. The house gets transferred to my name, or I press charges. No games, no delays. They stared at me like I had grown claws. For the first time, I saw fear in Charles's eyes. At the lawyer's office, the air was thick with tension. Papers slid across the desk. Pens scratched reluctantly. Linda's hands trembled as she signed. Ron's jaw clenched tight. Charles sat stone-faced, but I could feel the fury radiating off him. I watched every stroke of the pen, my heart pounding with a mix of triumph and grief. When the last signature was down, I slipped the documents into a folder and tapped it gently. These stay safe. No more stunts. Linda deflated in her chair, her sharpness gone. Ron looked smaller somehow, his bravado punctured. Charles glared at me, his silence louder than any insult. As we walked out of that office, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The house was mine now, in name and in law. But the cost. The cost was everything I thought love was supposed to be. And deep inside, I knew the war wasn't over. Charles wasn't the type to surrender quietly. The house felt different after the papers were signed. The walls still creaked, the plumbing still moaned, but there was a shift in the air. For the first time, I could walk through the hallway without feeling like a guest in someone else's story. The deed had my name on it now. My lawyer had confirmed it. Legally, this house was mine. But Charles and his parents stayed, circling me like vultures too stubborn to leave the carcass. Their gratitude soured into resentment almost overnight. Linda stopped cooking dinners, retreating into sulks and whispered complaints behind closed doors. Ron, once full of stories, hardly spoke at all except to grumble about the TV remote. And Charles, he became a stranger, his eyes cold, his voice clipped. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and found Linda staring out the window, her hands clutching the sink so tightly her knuckles whitened. Without turning, she said, "You think this house is yours, don't you?" I froze in the doorway. "It is, on paper and in truth." Her reflection in the glass twisted into a sneer. "Paper doesn't mean anything. Blood does. You're not blood, Karen. You'll never be one of us." I should have walked away, but something in me snapped. Maybe that's the best news I've heard all year. She spun, her face pale with fury, but before she could retort, Charles walked in. His gaze bounced between us, then landed on me like a blade. "Pack your things, Karen. I'm serious this time. I don't want you here." The words hit like a punch, but I held my ground. "You don't get to tell me where to go. This house is mine, legally mine. You signed it over yourself." His jaw tightened. "You tricked us, manipulated us." I let out a bitter laugh. "Manipulated? You wanted to steal from me. You burned documents you thought were my only proof. You plotted to leave me for someone richer. And now you're angry that I was smarter than you?" Linda gasped, clutching her chest like my words had struck her. Ron finally spoke, his voice low. "You'll regret crossing us, girl." But I wasn't the same girl who had once folded under pressure at their dinner table. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You'll regret underestimating me." From that night on, the house turned into a battlefield. Silence thickened the air, every shared space a minefield of glares and unspoken hostility. Charles stopped pretending altogether. He came home late, sometimes not at all. When he was there, he barely acknowledged me, except to sneer at the sight of my files spread across the dining table. "Still clinging to your precious receipts?" he mocked one night. "Yes," I replied calmly, not looking up. "And to my dignity, something you wouldn't recognize if it hit you in the face." For a moment, I thought he might strike me. His hand twitched, his jaw locked. But then he laughed bitterly and stormed out. The divorce papers were inevitable. I filed them quietly, efficiently, just as my father would have. The lawyer handled the rest. When Charles was served, he didn't rage. He smirked. "Good. Now I can finally be free." But his bravado cracked at the hearings. My lawyer presented every documented transfer, every payment I had made. The judge didn't look kindly on the scheme. Charles's mask slipped as the truth stacked higher against him. His smirk became a scowl, then silence. Linda sat in the gallery, her eyes burning holes into me. When the judge ruled in my favor, granting me sole ownership of the house and dissolving the marriage, I thought she might scream. Ron had to grip her arm to keep her seated. Outside the courthouse, Charles caught up with me. For a moment, the old charm flickered, a ghost of the man I thought I married. "Karen, you don't have to do this. We could start over." I stared at him, at the man who had once made me feel seen, now reduced to a beggar at the edge of his own downfall. "Start over? You buried that chance the moment you betrayed me. This," I gestured toward the courthouse behind us, "is the only ending you've earned." He opened his mouth, but no words came. He turned and walked away, shoulders hunched, a man smaller than he had ever seemed. The day the movers came for them, I stood on the porch and watched. Linda shuffled out with boxes of kitchenware, her face drawn tight with bitterness. Ron carried suitcases, his steps heavy. Charles emerged last, a duffel slung over his shoulder. He glanced at me once, his eyes hollow, then looked away. They loaded their things into a battered van and drove off without a word. As the van disappeared down the street, a strange silence settled over the house. For the first time since moving in, it belonged to me, not just in law, but in spirit. No more whispered schemes, no more forced smiles, just walls waiting to be filled with my own story. And yet, the victory was bittersweet. I had won, yes, but I had also lost my father, the dream of marriage, the innocence of believing love could be safe. That night, I sat at the dining table, the same table where they had once cornered me, and spread out my father's neatly labeled files. I touched the edges of the receipts, the agreements, every piece of paper he had insisted on. His voice echoed in my mind. "Don't let anyone take advantage of you, Karen." I whispered into the silence. "I didn't, Dad. Not in the end." But deep down, I knew the battle had changed me forever. The days after they left were eerily quiet. For the first time in months, the house felt still. No Linda bustling into my room without knocking, no Ron's television droning from the recliner, no Charles slamming doors when he didn't get his way. At first, the silence was jarring. I found myself listening for footsteps that never came, pausing at the sound of the pipes groaning, half expecting Linda's sharp voice to follow. But slowly, the quiet became something else, a balm, a reminder that the house, every creak and shadow, was mine now. I filled the empty rooms with small touches, fresh curtains, bright plants, a framed photo of my dad smiling in his work apron, grease smudged on his hands. I cooked in the kitchen without criticism. I played music in the living room without complaint. Piece by piece, I reclaimed the space, turning it from a battleground into a home. The divorce finalized quickly. Charles barely showed up. His arrogance burned away in the courtroom. The judge's ruling had been clear, firm, in my favor. When the papers arrived in the mail, I held them for a long time, the ink sinking into me like proof that I had survived. Word spread through mutual friends. Charles's new flame, the wealthy woman he had boasted about, dropped him within weeks, unwilling to deal with his baggage. Linda and Ron ended up in a cramped apartment on the edge of town, far from the manicured lawn they had once paraded as a badge of honor. They tried to reach out, of course. Calls, texts, even showing up once with hollow apologies and promises to start fresh. I blocked them all. My father's lesson echoed louder than their pleas. Don't let anyone take advantage of you, Karen. And yet, even with them gone, their shadows lingered. Some nights I lay awake replaying Charles's voice in my head, that cold, dismissive tone when he told me to pack my things. Other nights I dreamed of Linda's smug smile, Ron's chuckle when they thought they had outsmarted me. I woke drenched in sweat, clutching the sheets, reminding myself over and over, they're gone. This is my house now, my life. Then, one afternoon, a knock rattled the front door. I peered through the peephole. My stomach lurched. Charles. He stood on the porch, smaller somehow, a wilted bouquet of grocery store flowers clutched in his hand. His hair was unkempt, his shirt wrinkled. For a moment, I just stared, debating whether to even open the door. But I did, slowly. He tried to smile, but it faltered. Karen, I messed up. He held out the flowers like an offering. I see that now. I want to make it right. I leaned against the frame, arms crossed. A bitter laugh slipped out before I could stop it. Make it right? Charles, you're not here for me. You're here because your plan fell apart. His face crumpled, but I pressed on. You betrayed me, lied to me, tried to erase me, and now you think flowers will undo all that? He stepped closer, desperation leaking into his voice. Please, Karen, we had something once. We can have it again. I'll change. I'll prove it. I shook my head, pity flooding where love used to be. No, Charles, you don't get to rewrite history. I gave you everything, my heart, my trust, my money, and you threw it all away. I glanced back into the house, sunlight spilling through clean windows, plants swaying gently by the sill. This life, this peace, it's mine now, not yours. His eyes glistened, but I didn't soften. I stepped back, my hand firm on the door. We're done. Don't come back. I closed the door. The latch clicked into place, echoing like a final gavel. On the other side, I heard him linger, then footsteps retreating down the porch. I didn't watch him leave. I didn't need to. Inside, the house was still. My house. My father's voice echoed again, not in warning this time, but in quiet approval. I sank into my armchair. a book open in my lap, steam rising from a fresh cup of tea. Light filtered through the curtains, soft and golden, wrapping me in warmth. For the first time in years, I felt free. I thought of the girl who once found comfort only in numbers, who measured safety by how small she could keep her world. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who had faced betrayal, loss, and cruelty, and still stood tall. I whispered into the quiet, a promise to myself, whatever comes next, I'm ready. Because this wasn't the end. It was the beginning, a blank page waiting for me to write it on my own terms.